so that they were hearing it directly from the horse's mouth, and it wasn't getting it secondhand. So these sessions became pretty interesting.
Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. I'm your host, Clayton O'Brien, and I'm the fire chief for the city of Oregon. All right, welcome to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, proactive. We actually are here today at the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association conference down at the Hilton Easton. As you remember, last year we did do a roundtable discussion with a few different chiefs. Again, we get to be able to be up here in the presidential suite in the hospitality room. If you've never been to the conference, though, I strongly encourage you to just take the time, at least come down for a couple days. You'll be able to see what it's all about. I know this morning classes were Corley Moore. If you haven't heard of Corley Moore, he's the Weekly Scrap podcaster, the Firehouse Vigilance, and he has done a great job on talking about the 9 L's. So it's a book that he has wrote. It's actually, I'm currently in the middle of reading it, and he talks all about it. So it's a really good class. Today we get to, I'm fortunate enough to be able to sit here with, I don't even know what really kind of title to call the guy, but he is the guy, you know. So we got Mike Bell. Mike Bell and I remember you from, a long time ago when you were originally the Toledo Fire and Rescue fire chief. That's when I first remember knowing who Mike Bell was. But then you've progressed from not only fire chief Mike Bell to then Mayor Mike Bell to State Fire Marshal Mike Bell. And so all these big high profile positions, I feel like you have a lot to offer into what the audience that we're trying to get to be able to talk about just all the different things that it is. And then what you do today, because now today being an ambassador for 1-800 Board Up or First Priority. And if I said that wrong, and we're going to go through around in introductions or whatever, but to be that, then that's the things that I want to be able to talk about today of how it stemmed up and early on in your career to why it led you to where we're at today. So before we get going though and kick it off, let's go around and do a little introduction. We'll start with you.
Well, I'm Mike Bell, former chief of the city of Toledo for about 16 years, state fire marshal for 2, and mayor of Toledo for 4. And just great to be here today.
And it was in that order too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I couldn't remember exactly, but
sometimes I can't either. Getting old.
Okay. Who now? Can you tell us who do you got here with you?
Well, I got Jason Yoder, and Jason is actually part of the 1-800 Board Up First Priority group that is in Northwest Ohio. The part that is unusual about Jason is that he is actually from Whitmer High School. And was very successful, lives in Chicago and Florida, okay, and decided that he wanted to do something in his hometown, and so he came back here and got myself involved with some other people to be able to create the First Priority here to be able to help victims at fire scenes. So, that is what got me hooked, was that here's a man that doesn't have to come back here. His businesses are doing well. And he chose to come back to the Northwest Ohio area to be able to help people out.
Yeah, I think that's a testament.
That's quite an introduction. I appreciate that very much. So I own First Priority, and First Priority owns a 1-800 Board Up franchise. That's how we're involved here. Obviously, the name implies that we do board ups on houses, but we also handle victim assistance and everything after a fire to help people to get them all the way back through the recovery process. And we've also got Pete Shaw, who's our emergency response coordinator, our ERC. He is one of the guys that is very first out on the scene and handles the victim assistance piece when we're on scene. So I'll let Pete chat about himself for a minute.
Yeah, I got on board with Jason. I've known him somewhere over 30 years, and when he came back to Toledo, mentioning that he's putting this business together, I quickly got on board with the buy-in with what we're doing, working with Chief Bell and getting to know the culture of the firefighters and understand what they go through on a day-to-day basis has been enlightening. But it's also been more appreciating that, what we do and helping victims.
Well, thanks. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's start at the very beginning of the time that you were in your early mid-30s, probably, right? When we were talking last night, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm an old man now. Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think so much just in our area, just in the Lucas County area,
Absolutely,
there is so many individuals that are currently new fire chiefs.
Yes.
So we've had a lot of new fire chiefs, a lot of different turnover, all that sort of thing in our area. So let's go back to when you first became the chief at Toledo Fire.
Yes.
Managing a department that big, the age that you were. Let's just talk about that a little bit.
Well, it was totally a unique experience, even just for the department itself. I was 35 years old, and it was one of the first times, I think, in the history of the department where they had taken a person that was a captain and made him the chief of the department. So when you go into something like that, you got a whole lot of you got people that are supporting you, but you got a whole lot of people that are really perturbed at you. Now, all you're doing is trying to better yourself and hopefully better the department at the same time, but it doesn't necessarily flow that way because, fire services have a lot of history. They got a lot of tradition of how they do things, and if this particular promotion actually worked outside of the normal protocols for how maybe people normally saw a fire chief being selected. I mean, we had a full process that went national, and it dropped down to, there were 3 of us by the time it was all over with, and I ended up being the chief, but even though all that process happened, it's still, jumping that many ranks, it just broke protocol hugely, and it, people were coming at me sort of crazy at the beginning, and in addition, I was the first black chief in the state of Ohio, so you got that portion of it going, in a metropolitan city, so you got that portion going, so you're the first or something, you're first in your department.
Were you the youngest too?
Youngest. I'd go to the metro conferences all through the United States, and that's how I'd be in. So, kid, where are you at? Where you at, kid? How big is your department, kid? And, they'd go through that with me all the time. So it was a very unique experience. I tell people, and I've said this, the best day was the day that I got the job, but it was also the worst day because from that point on, you have a target. And there are going to be people who are going to want to work with you, and there are going to be people that don't want to. The ones that don't want to are sort of undercover, So, but that they're doing things to maybe back you up a little bit.
But the city had to recognize at some point that they wanted a change, or why did maybe this break protocol? Because you know what I mean? Like, was it a culture thing in Toledo Fire, or what was it that you think that it went?
What had happened that actually even opened up the position was that there was a former chief, and he had gotten into some sort of a discussion that was at conflict with the human resource director, and it just didn't flow well, and I'll just keep it generalized.
Yeah.
So they removed the chief, and then they put an acting chief in for a while, and that person didn't want to stay in the position. So it created an opening, and I can tell you that what happened to get me even in the process was that there were some chiefs that, when I was captain, that I really respected. I went to all of them, and I said, well, are you guys going to apply for these positions? And they go, no, we're not doing that. I said, what do you mean you're not going to do it? You guys would be perfect. No, we're not doing that. We don't want to do that. I said, well, shoot. Well, if you guys aren't going to do it, then I'm going to try to control portions of my destiny, and at least I'll know that if I step up and I try to go through this process, even if I'm not successful as a captain in being able to do it, at least I'll know what the process is about.
Sure.
And that was my whole thing, that at least I'll know what the process is, and then the next time it opens up, maybe I'll have a better shot, okay? So I got involved. I figured there was nothing to lose. It was the first time they had actually dropped it down to where actually lieutenants and captains could actually be a part of the process. So why not go and just learn what the process is? So that's how it started. And if it hadn't been for that, it would be, I don't know where I'd be today, but it would have been a whole different process. But
I was kind of in a similar situation in Napoleon because we had worked for an outside chief. You know, he came in from the outside, and I just thought that, you know, our place, it was terrible. The culture was the culture was bad. You know, it's a stepping stone. Everybody's wanting to leave on a regular basis because just no different than what Corley was talking about this morning. It's all about the environment.
Yes.
If you create an environment that people want to be around, people will be around it.
Right.
If you don't, then, you know, they're gonna, you know, look to go to the next spot. And so when I was in that same boat, so when that chief moved on, it opened it up, same for us, opened it up to the outside. And I'm like, well, at the time, being a union president, then I'm like, well, you got to go something. We got to at least throw our name in the hat. It was like 4 or 5. I think there was 13 in the end. That, and I was 31 years old at the time. And at the time that you do this, you're thinking about the organization as the most, like, because quite honestly, the sweet spot's not the fire chief job.
no, it is not. No, it absolutely is not. I mean, that is target number one.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and it's not even you know, inside the system. It's not even the highest paying job.
Very true.
It's just, but it's the highest responsibility of the department, and but it's extremely dependent on the whole team being able to do what's necessary to make the department look good. And the team concept was always a big one with me because I played football at the University of Toledo, and I'd always been a part of a team. So I looked at the fire service as a team. You know, we eat, we sleep together.
Yeah.
You know, we do all these things, and then we respond together, and we're prepared to. You don't want to ever see it happen, but we're prepared to do the ultimate to make sure that the public's safe. So I love the team concept of the fire service. So, you know, that portion of me just like the people, because they were committed. You know, regardless of how crazy they get, when it's time to go, they're extremely committed. And that you don't find that in too many places.
So one of the things you kind of alluded to was that not everybody wants to see the castle, you know, stay at castle. They sometimes want to see that castle crumble. So when you first became chief, what kind of like battles did you deal with because now you're captain going over, you would have went over a battalion chief, over deputy chiefs, over assistant chiefs, you know, in your size organization. So how'd that go?
Well, I only heard rumors that, you know, people said, you know, we're going to run this kid out of here in about 6 months, and, you know, that'll be the end of that show, you know. So where I came from, I'm a North Toledo guy, you know, Spring School, Woodward High School, and I was used to tough situations and things not necessarily being, you know, always perfect, but, you know, you learn how to work around things. And I had some great parents, I got great brothers, and, you know, I had great friends, and so I was still focused on being able to do it the way it needed to be done. And so when I heard about it, because somebody whispered that to me, I said, well, you know, I think I'm up for this challenge, you know, and let's just go, because once again, it's about a team. You know, regardless of who would have been the chief, I would have always been the person to respect the position and move forward with it. But I understood now that we're into reality, and some people don't work off that type of energy. So they were coming crazy, and you know, you were asking me, well, how was it? Well, yeah, we had some real crazy things that occurred at the beginning, you know, because people are trying to feel you out. And one of the things that I know, and it's from football or anything, is that, you know, you got to have some line of discipline. You have to have some standard that everybody's got to be able to meet. And so we had some hearings really early in my career, and some of them were, I don't want to really get too deep into it, but they were pretty good cases. And, being a hearing officer and trying to be fair with everybody, but also understand that there's a standard inside the operation itself that has to be maintained. And, when you're dealing with firefighters, there are going to be people who are going to say, okay, if you discipline somebody, then look at what he did. See, he's not on your side. But deep down inside, they know that there's a standard, and they want the standard adhered to. But they're not going to be the ones to take any of the heat over it. Okay, so I became the guy that took the heat, and I can remember one of my first hearings. I said, Robert Swanzo helped me out immensely. He was my assistant chief when I became chief, and he was helping me through the system, helping me through the history, helping me with a lot of stuff. We actually became very, very, very close, and I would not have been able to do some of this stuff without his help, because he had 30-something years on the department. He understood everything and all the dynamics. So we're at the first hearing, and it's one of these things that you don't want to see again, okay? And so we get to the end of the hearing. I said, lean over to Chief Swanzo. I said, how many days can we give for this? Because I'm new. I don't do hearings, okay? He said, well, you can give up to 3 days on this particular issue. I said, really? I said, yeah. I said, okay, then 3 days, okay? Well, the whole room, because everything was sort of relaxed up until that point, when you come into a hearing.
Rubber meets the road now.
Oh, yeah. Man, if people had wigs on, they would have been spinning around, coming back on, and it's like, what? Have you lost your mind? What? No, it's 3 days. What? A lot of stuttering going on, and I was trying to create a standard. I wanted people to be proud of where they came from, what they were doing, and that there was a standard in the fire service that we needed to be able to maintain. So from that point on, I got multiple other hearings, because we were sort of a little bit wild at that time, that I had to start dealing with. So my nickname for discipline became Maximum Mike. He said, you don't want to go to Maximum Mike's court. You don't want to go. You don't want to go. Okay. And I'd be like, I'm not making you do this stuff, but I'm the guy that's supposed to take care of it.
That's right.
And it's uncomfortable, and there are people that I like, but if you aren't prepared to maintain a standard, then it becomes, why do you even have a standard? Yep. So, but here's the part that got interesting. So if you travel ahead of time now, 15 years later, 14 years later, whatever, and I'm still there, okay, there would be people who would come to a hearing that knew that they had messed up, would wave off the union representative, would come into the hearing. They said, I already know what I'm going to get. I just want to talk to the chief. And we would sit down, and we wouldn't even be talking about the issues of the hearing. That was done. We would just be sitting there talking for 45 minutes about their families and things like that. So, because they understood that I didn't create the problem, I'm just there, I got to fix this thing, okay? And I'm uncomfortable with it, but that doesn't change that I have to do what I have to do, And so I was extremely proud of the Toledo Fire Department, the idea of being able to, we had some chiefs that did some outstanding things. I was telling you about Chief Coleman and Incident Command, and Phil Kennysucker, and what he was able to do from the standpoint of going to Harvard and helping us with the accreditation program, and made us one of the first in the state of Ohio to be able to be accredited.
Was that the first time Toledo was ever accredited? When you were there?
We were one of the first in the state of Ohio to be accredited. Okay.
Wow. What year was that?
Whew, man. It was late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a long process, and Phil had gone to the Harvard school, and he came back with all this energy, Phil Kennysucker, and he was just really good with it. You know, I had other great people like Joe Walter, you know, who now runs the Fire Museum. He was one of my assistant chiefs. I mean, just my team that came in, they were all different, but they were good at what they were doing. And the people that were at the different departments, they were unbelievable too. I mean, the different stations, the way they responded, the stuff they did, you know, like I said, I understand as a chief that sometimes they're going to be looking at you as the, you know, the ass, okay? But that's the nature of the job. As long as they're doing their job, I'll take the hit, you know, and they were very good at what they were doing. And so, you know, we had the nice part about the accreditation, you know, we had to be able to document our response times and how fast we were getting out of the stations and the whole thing. So, I mean, it just, man, and it was because the mayor at the time, who was Cardi, he had challenged us, you know, what makes you think you're one of the best departments in the nation? Because we know we are. You know, one of the things we were able to do is get the death rate in the city of Toledo down to 0, okay? Nobody thought we could do that. And it wasn't me, it was the team. You know, all these firefighters and fire prevention and smoke detector programs and public education, everything was working together. You know, we became extremely creative. We got the paramedics on the bikes, and we had paramedics on golf carts before they were even popular. And part of that was from traveling to the, you know, we're here at a Chiefs conference. It was from traveling at Chiefs conferences and being able to see what other departments were doing and seeing if we couldn't replicate that in Toledo. One of the things that I never was able to complete, though, we tried to get the Harley Davidson paramedic program, and that was happening down in Miami, okay, because they had it. I said, well, shoot.
You like your Harley.
Yeah, we can't have horses like the police officer, but we can have some Harley Davidsons. And we didn't quite pull that one off, okay, but that was one of the things from, once again, traveling to conferences and talking to different people. That was very popular back in the Miami area, a lot of places in Florida, because the traffic backs up and they can't get rigs through there, but they could get people through on motorcycles. And so they get there and be able to start the process before the rest of their crews are able to get there.
But when you started in Toledo and first getting chief, you had some turmoil, essentially.
Yes.
At some point, you know, you had to create everybody, get them empowered, or, you know, create this team. What advice would you give to a young chief that is now starting out, and maybe they're experiencing some of this turmoil in their department? What advice are you going to give them to kind of like get this team to become a team, you know, essentially?
You're going to have people that are working against you, but there are a lot of people that want to see you be successful too. And what you have to do is you just got to figure out who those people are. I mean, you got to be able to read personalities and characters and things like that. You know the person that really wants to move up through the system. You know the person that really cares about their department. And then you also understand the people who are just in it for the money. Now, those people aren't that big of a group, at least they weren't at the time that I was chief. So, you know, you start nurturing those types of people. Like what happened that really brought those other chiefs in as part of my team is that I had to make because the organization was a little bit backwards when I took over. So we had deputy chiefs that would be on a 24-hour day. Okay?
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had battalion chiefs that were on staff that would be writing these policies, okay? But these deputies that are doing a 24-hour day, when the battalions would write the policies, they say, well, we don't have to pay attention to those policies because we're deputies and we're hiring them and we didn't write the policies, but they're not around to write the policies. So I said, you know, I think the command system here is a little bit backwards. So what I did is I took and put the deputies on an 8-hour day, and then we created a position called Senior Battalion Chief to cover the issues that would be administratively oriented when we go home at night.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Now, the deputies were still supposed to be responsible for making second alarms and being able to do the assist, because that's the bottom core of the fire service. Well, my deputies decided at the time that they were not going to respond after 5 o'clock. Then they figured they were jamming me up, okay? But I had some battalion chiefs who were pretty sharp, and here was the other part. These deputies were right at the core portion of where we were just starting, the fire service was just starting to get into the incident command system. They didn't necessarily agree with it, but the young chiefs understood it and had started to learn it, and were starting to initiate it on their battalion chief field operation runs, okay? So these same chiefs were the ones that decided. I said, okay, so the deputies, you guys, you really are not going to do it? And no, we're not going to respond to second alarms, which I thought, one of the core values of the fire service for me was that, you call, we go, And here we got guys talking about they're not going to go. And I could have fought it legally, but I didn't want to do that. Okay, you don't want to do that? You don't want to be there? Okay, fine. So I got with these battalion chiefs and understood that they knew how to run these fires, and they agreed to respond. Gave them pagers. It was pagers back then. Okay,
Yep.
Not cell phones, pagers. Gave them pagers, and they started responding to these second alarms. And guess what? Fires started going out quicker. Okay, because they were using incident command, and it was just amazing. So much so that eventually each one of the deputies came back into the system one at a time. I'd know the knock on the door, I'd hit his, and I'd know what that knock meant, okay? and one at a time, they came back in, I really don't have a problem with responding to second alarm, so you can put me back on the list. Well, see, what they had done is in the process of trying to make a problem for me, they made a problem for themselves, because when these second alarms were occurring, they weren't making any overtime, okay? Yep. But these battalion chiefs were, and they started looking at it and went, oh, wait a second, maybe we messed up here, okay? I understood the deal, but at least they came back in to the system. And you sometimes, when you talk about young chiefs, sometimes you got to have patience. You got time. I can remember sitting at a meeting where the older chiefs, once again, were trying to create some policies to be proactive and stuff like that. And they come at me and they go, I can tell that you're not going to do what I'm asking you to do. You're all sitting around the table, and I can tell that you guys are basically going to slow walk me on this. So I looked them in the eye and I said, well, let me just say something, okay? The policies that I'm creating, that actually I'm not doing it by myself, I'm doing it using national standards and everything, are going to get implemented. I said, I got more time left in this position than you guys have left on Earth, okay? So my policies will be put into place. It's just a matter of whether you'll be able to see it or not, okay? Because I was such a young chief.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, maybe they wouldn't be around. I couldn't retire for another 15 years or so. So, I was going to be around for a while. So they looked at me, and I think it shocked them, because I was just straight up candid with them, and I was getting grievances at the beginning that I didn't create. I hadn't changed any policies in the first 3 or 4 months of anything, okay? And the grievances were going through the roof. Well, that was part of the we're going to run you out of here thing. But when I started handing the grievances to the battalion chiefs that were responsible for it and the deputies that were responsible for it, all of a sudden the grievances went away.
Yeah, when you're spreading that workload.
Yeah, and I said, you guys write the grievances, okay? You answer them, and if I don't like them, I'll give it back to you. You can answer it again.
Yep.
Okay, and all of a sudden it went away. But that was part of the game, and it's a test of you, but it's also a good thing because you're getting credibility when they test you. If nobody wants a weak chief.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if you bend and break and whine, and they're not into all that.
I'll say what you said, patience was that is a great way of saying, especially in good advice, because in the way I think about it, and what's kind of calmed me a lot was because when you're a firefighter on the line, you show up for a 24-hour shift. And when I show up for a 24-hour shift, I know everything is going to be done by the time I leave at the next morning at 0700.
Right.
So we're going to answer all the calls. The reports are going to be done. It's just going to be, we've completed everything in 24 hours. Whereas as you continue to climb that ladder, you're looking out farther and farther. As an officer, you might be having a week project or a month project, all the way up to, where being the chief, when I went from firefighter to fire chief, I realized the brakes got put on big time.
Yeah.
And if you didn't find that government runs slow and have patience, you're going to be super frustrated. This instant gratification of being a fire chief or being a firefighter because everything's done right away when we're doing it, compared to where you're just in slow-mo of having to take XYZ, 3 reads at council meetings, and just all the things of the process. And I think that just one of the main things that kind of helped build the team on building on the patience of me understanding it is that I would kind of express, I wouldn't express my frustration, but I would express the process of what was happening to keep all the firefighters informed. Because if they're informed along the entire way, they understand it's just not like, to your credibility, it's just not just over here not getting done. Mm-hmm. It's you're working on it, and there's a process, and we're educating them on what that process is.
Well, what we started doing, to your point on that, is I came up with this idea because I realized that some of the stuff that we were trying to get out to our firefighters weren't making it to them, okay?
Okay.
Because that's the other part of the game, okay? So we started having what we called input sessions. So it'd take 3 days to do. We bring every station into the IMLA building, which is the maintenance building now. And we would have these sessions where I would tell them exactly what we're trying to do. And in a general population type thing, they could ask any questions they wanted about why we're doing it, whatever. So that they were hearing it directly from the horse's mouth, and it wasn't getting it secondhand. So these sessions became pretty interesting because the firefighters were able to, they didn't like something, they could say whatever they wanted to say, but now you got to say it in front of the whole group, okay? Just like I'm giving it to you in front of the group, you can say it back, and if we got it wrong, then we'll correct it. If we don't have it wrong, then you can't say you didn't know what we were trying to do, because that's the other part. Communications is a big thing for anybody that's in leadership position. You can make assumptions that people know what you're trying to do, but a lot of times they don't. You think it's common sense to you, but it's not necessarily common sense to them. So you have to be able to make sure that they understand clearly why you're doing something and what the direction is and what you hope to accomplish by that.
And our human nature automatically thinks that, if I'm thinking about what your intention is or what your motivation is, it's usually not, a positive thing. Like, when it comes from firefighter, because we've all been in those situations. You think that, there's some sort of motive or there's some sort of agenda that's going to be different, where when you do hear it from the horse's mouth and you're able to explain why, because that's the biggest difference in the generational change right now is just the why. If you could explain why,
right,
and then they fully understand that if we give this a college try for 6 months and realize this ain't working, then okay,
right.
Nobody's too proud to make a change, know.
And that was also, it was helping with when I knew that we were giving good information out at the chief staff meetings, but some of them it wasn't getting repeated. And I understand human behavior, so I said, okay, we'll start doing this. And it was really interesting because nobody had done it, and we're sitting there and we're doing this, and people are starting to catch on, okay. And if they had some ideas, hey, you got an idea? Sitting here, we'll try to put together.
Hey, Chief. When in your career did you notice a turning point from we're going to give this guy a whole bunch of hard time to, hey, he's on it and he's respected and let's get behind him?
After about the first couple years, people started to change their opinion. But it's in the fire service is a very slow process, okay? So every year you're getting a little bit larger percentage of people, But I would say that I had a small group of people probably within 6 months. And then it started to get larger after that. You're never going to get 100%, but I would say that 80 to 90% of the people knew, at least, even if they disagreed with me, they knew what I was trying to do. Okay, and that was, but it took, to your point, where it started to calm down, probably about 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you another thing with regards to the accreditation and the accreditation process, because that's a huge feather in your cap. Somebody explained it to me once before, but I know with our group, we've got a lot of guys that are laymen that don't know what that is or what it means, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit more. That's really an awesome thing for the city of Toledo. I know I've got another fire chief in Illinois that I work with in Naperville who was the Illinois fire. He was the head of the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association, and he had done some other things. But their outfit is accredited, and I know that's a big deal. So,
yeah, well, it was about from the standpoint of budgets in the fire service and stuff like that. It was being able to demonstrate, why do you do what you do? Why do you want to be there in 7 minutes? Okay, why do you want to do that? How much time does it take you to get out of the engine house? Okay, how many people are you responding with? Okay, what's the standard response? What type of equipment are you using? Okay, how often are you changing the equipment? And things like that protect the health of firefighters and protect the life safety of people in these residences that you're responding to. The reason it was such a big deal for me, one, it gave us a target to shoot for to prove that we were the best. Yeah. Okay. Well, the second portion is that we had politicians that were starting to question why we do what we do. And so the accreditation process itself helped us be able to explain to them why we were doing what we were doing, which backed them off immensely.
7 minutes. I mean, get your clothes on, get out of the firehouse, get everything loaded up that you need to get loaded up, and then get to a site in 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And if you didn't, you had to do a report that let us know why you didn't make it there. Because typically in the districts that the first response is out of, that's where the 7 minute portion was geared toward, okay? So they should be able to do that based on the map. And that was the other part, when we're trying to figure out our response times, we started repositioning equipment based on our ability to do that.
Yeah.
So once again, justifying why are you doing this? Because we know that fire doubles fairly quickly, and the longer we take, the worse it's going to get. So
is that response just for fires, or is it also for EMS? And
we had it basically for everything.
Yeah.
Okay, and when you're dealing with the other types of emergencies, I mean, imagine yourself holding your breath for 7 minutes if you're having a heart attack. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Or you're not breathing,
exactly.
Or if you're underwater or whatever. So it's about the ability of being able to bring people back to a condition of life during that process. But the whole idea was to make sure that we had something that held us accountable, and then use that to be able to get the equipment or whatever else we needed.
Yeah.
To be able to save those lives.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome.
So it sounds like through the process of being like the Toledo chief, it sounds like you're really engaged in people.
Yes.
How to manage people, how to get along with people, how to communicate with people, that sort of thing. So like I feel like that's what the case is, because it really leads you then. You went from Toledo Fire. How long were you chief for there?
16 and a half years.
Yeah, and that's a long time for that size department. That's one heck of a career. So you went from there to...
I started off with hair, and I'm totally bald-headed now. Okay.
Did you really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen you with hair.
Oh, come on. I was a hunk.
So did you? So then you said you went to.
I went to the state fire marshal's
yeah.
office after that. You know, it was one of those things where you just know that it's about time to move on. Okay.
All right.
And so I went there, and I didn't really. Me getting to the fire marshal's office was, you know, I know there are people that don't necessarily religiously believe in things, but it was sort of an act of God. Okay. And the reason I say that is that when I knew it was time to go, there were some things happening, and I said, man, you know, and it was above my head.
Yeah.
So it wasn't inside the department; it's above. And I'm like, well, I've been dealing with this for a long time. I said, there's got to be another way to deal. I mean, we're doing well. We've gotten it down to zero. All the things are going well, but I'm still taking this butt kicking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, man, I got to move on. And so I knew I had seen an application for the state fire marshal's office. It had come in the mail, but somewhere it had disappeared. Okay. So I asked around my people, because somebody threw it away. I asked my people, they go, has anybody seen that marshal's application? Well, what are you talking about? You know, I thought there was an application that came in from the state fire marshal's office. Oh, no, nobody's seen it. Then later on that evening, I go back to the office, and this crumpled up piece of paper is sitting on my desk where somebody had thrown it away, okay? So I fill it out, and I figure my chances of that are probably slim and none, but hey, let's just give it a shot. So I sent the crumpled up application in, okay, with my stuff, and I got an interview, okay? So when they're interviewing me, I'm thinking, you know, this is way too political for me, and, you know, this isn't going to happen, but I'm just honored. I am just honored that they're giving me the opportunity to at least interview. I know they have to make their own selections, and they were very fair with me, and Kim Zers, and I can remember when we got to the end of the interview, I said, now I know how this all works, okay, and I know that this is probably not going to work out. I get it, but I just want to thank you both. Yeah, Gordon was there too, for giving me an opportunity. It appears to me that you were fair to me in this interview. So I know you got to select who you got to select, and I'm good with, well, how do you know you're not going to get it? I'm not going to get this. So fine. Well, how do you know you're not going to get it? I know I'm not going to get it. So the next day, I get on my motorcycle. I ride down to Florida, okay? I just take a ride, okay? So I'm in the middle of, I'd gotten all the way down to Key West, just me on my motorcycle. And having a good time thinking about, yeah, well, maybe this is what retirement will be like, you know? So I'm good, you know, I'm just sort of written this thing off. And all of a sudden I get once again, a page, okay? I'm thinking,
the little page.
The little page, yeah.
Okay.
I get a page. You need to call the Department of Commerce right away, you know. For what? No, you need to call them. And I found out that I had gotten the position when I was down in Key West on my motorcycle.
Wow.
So I had to spin the bike around. That's quite a ride back, you know. But I'm humming along, you know, thinking, well, nah, this is pretty cool. And so that's sort of how I got there, you know. And like I said, I'm quite sure other people that were extremely qualified too, but that enabled me to become the state fire marshal. It was an unbelievable experience. I took what I learned in North Toledo and all the different, you know, coming from North Toledo, I mean, there's so many different race groups there, you know, you learn how to deal with everybody, you know, and that's the same thing as the state of Ohio. So I'd go places and it would just be really interesting. I did go to two events. I went to an Amish village, you know, trying to enforce the code in a totally different culture. Was just a very interesting situation. But what you have to do is, once again, you talked about it a little bit earlier, you have to build up a relationship. We were able to build up a relationship that allowed for us to actually start to institute some of the issues that we had from the State Fire Marshal's office, because we became not necessarily an authority coming in there. We became just like a partner. And they were real good with us. In fact, in that particular group, if they call you by your first name, they don't necessarily work off of titles. Where's Michael? They say, where's Michael? Well, he's not here today. But it was just an interesting thing being able to see a part of Ohio that I didn't even know. I'm coming from Toledo. When you pull up, and there are 30 carriages, and there's only maybe 1 or 2 cars, you're in a different environment. But it was an extremely friendly environment, and I just totally enjoyed every time I'd go back there. It was just a great place to be, and the people were just so friendly. And then there was an experience down in, I think I told you about this, down near Southern Ohio, and I go into this department, and I'm supposed to be the speaker, and I'm pretty sure that for the most part, maybe it appeared to be that way. I'm not sure that they didn't know that the state fire marshal was black. Okay, so I'm down in the middle of this, and I go in this place, and I'm down there, and I get there before some of the other my investigators. Normally they would come and they'd explain what they're doing too in the area, and so they're not there yet. So it's just me. So I pull up, and I'm in an unmarked car, and I'm not. There's probably 100 people or so playing horseshoes in front of the station. I'm like, man, I am not walking in there by myself. It was something that just didn't feel right. So I go into this gas station, which is across the street, and I'm thinking I found a little safe haven to look across the way and just watch the process of what's going on. Man, I go in there. This is the biggest gun shop I've ever seen in my life. It was like in a BP. The only thing it didn't have was those that movie where Freddy Krueger is in it with swords and blades swinging everywhere. I'm like, where am I at? Okay, but so I go in and I go to speak at this event, and I can tell that the people are real nervous about the whole thing. The introduction that I get that I'm the state is real short, but we're going to have dinner. Okay. And once again, I told you, I come from an area where I'm used to people being different. So I was trying to study it so that I could treat people with respect and know exactly how to approach this. But that's why I went to the gas station. It wasn't that I was scared. I just wanted to make sure that when I approached it, I knew exactly how to deal with it, okay? And so I go in. So the chief introduced me. Everybody's just like, oh. Okay, I said, man,
tough crowd.
This is going to be a real tough crowd. So he said, okay, well, we're gonna start eating. Okay, so let's just work around. It was like a buffet. So I get to this buffet, and they got red beans and rice, cornbread, chicken, greens. So, and everybody's behind me. They'll let me go through the line first. I say, and they go. I said, who called my mama? Which one of you guys called my mama? Somebody called my mama here, because there's no way you guys eat this stuff. I said, somebody called and they're rolling. They're rolling, okay? and by the time it was all over with, that broke the ice. And we had a really, really good time. And I think, once again, patience. You got to give people a chance to adjust. Mm-hmm. Their ability to fight fires and to care about people that they love is the same as anywhere else, okay? I just had to, it was different for me being the marshal and coming into a situation like that, because I didn't see it that often. And I'm by myself, okay? So, but it was an unbelievable experience, totally enjoyed it. And it explains the diversity of the fire service throughout the state of Ohio. So that was, being the state fire marshal was an excellent experience. I will tell chiefs all around, though, if you decide to have a public education event, we learned this the hard way too, and you have a bubble machine, you probably don't want to have a bubble machine there, okay? We had a bubble machine at the marshal's office, and it created all this big bubble suds, and this lady lost her 4-year-old child that she was supposed to be with, went into the bubbles, and the bubbles were higher than he was.
But light. All right, go ahead.
So this kid gets lost in these bubbles, and we don't know where he's at because the bubbles are so high. Okay, now here,
And this is at the fire marshals
Yeah.
in Reynoldsburg. Okay.
yeah, we don't do bubbles anymore. Okay, because it had never happened. Okay, and the idea that the mom would not be with the child wasn't even a consideration when they're that young. So we were able to find the kid in the bubbles, okay? And the reason I brought this up is that if you're thinking about doing something like that, probably you don't want to, okay? We were fortunate that day that, what we were concerned about is that if the kid tripped or something like that, and then we just didn't know where he was at. Mm-hmm. So we were able to do what was necessary, and he was fine. We found him. He was crying. He was fine. But it was one of those things where you're trying to do something that's fun for kids, and it turns into something that's crazy.
Always.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So we learned something from that, and it was something that they had done before. So it wasn't like the first time, but it was just one of those things where it was the first time somebody didn't keep a hold of their child. Mm-hmm. And so when we're doing those PR things in the fire service, we got to really make sure that we are making it extremely safe for children, because they're going to do something that you're not going to expect them to do. And even though you have good intent, it can turn into something.
Well, and that's where it starts, is that you had good intent. You wanted to do something different that nobody else was doing,
Right.
so that it would make them excited. And then,
Right.
and then you're like, oh, shoot, of course something like this happened, and then
Right.
now we're like,
You wouldn't have been able to do it unless it was being done around places, but it just happened to be that day, and the suds got suds got high. That was an interesting one.
Well, there you have it. Part number 1, all complete. Come back next month for part number 2 with Chief Mike Bell as we continue to talk to him about his just such amazing career. Thanks again, Chief, for being on here on the Triple P podcast, and thank you to everybody that's out there listening. And we hope that you tune in next month for part 2.
Thank you for tuning in to the Triple P podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you feel so inclined, please help us spread the word by telling your fire and EMS friends about this channel.